You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Monday, May 5th, and usually, a day like today would be kind of boring, but fortunately for us, John Lynch joined the Chris Sims podcast and dropped some interesting nuggets for us to discuss here today, and joining me, as always, to do so is Weston Smith. Weston, how you doing, man?
Happy Cinco de Mayo for those who participate.
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, I enjoyed what we're listening to, what we're probably gonna unpack. And you're right, there would be a light content Monday if it wasn't for the dropping of that.
Yeah,
I call it a presser, but let's just call it what it was, an interview on Chris Sims' podcast, which is also funny to me in some ways that it was on Chris Sims' platform and we constantly destroy Chris Sims for his outlandish 49er takes.
We do, but
yeah.
there's no denying that he has his connections to both John and Kyle. So had it not been Chris Sims asking for the invite, we maybe would have not gotten this. And he had John Lynch for close to an hour. So I gotta give him some props for that. It wasn't just some little 10-minute, 15-minute interview. He got some stuff out of him.
An hour of a GM's time is a lot of time. And admittedly, right, I was in the middle of something. You send it to me and I was like, oh, I'm going to watch this. And you asked for my input. And I was like, I'm 17, 18 minutes in and I don't know what the talk track is just yet, which is crazy, right? Because when you get time with a GM, you get time with a coach, especially if you're just a third party podcast, it's got to be bang, 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 rapid fire. Yeah. This felt like two old pals just hanging out, Well, I'm sure some of these questions were layups, right? And given in advance in some capacity. I don't think any of it was earth shattering or John wasn't caught off guard by anything in any means. It was a friendly platform for him to be able to do it, but it was long and it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best type of interview where it does feel like two friends, because then you do kind of get a little more honesty, maybe some stories that maybe you wouldn't normally share. But there was still the John Lynch isms in this one, as well as, he's so good. Just putting that brave media face when he has to. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we get into anything else, before anyone asks in the live chat, no, the 49ers should not sign Justin Tucker. That is all.
Oh, God, no.
Thank you. Okay.
No NFL team should sign.
I'm glad we got that. Well, because you know, Weston, that there would be 49er fans be like, oh, the 49ers should cut Jake Moody and sign Justin Tucker. They should maybe cut Jake Moody, but let's not sign Justin Tucker. Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Hi. Say hi to Steph.
Just talking Niners here. You'll know about this in due time.
He already knows about it. He's in the know. Trust me. He was literally no joke. I was watching the interview on my phone on the couch, and he's just after he got home from daycare, and he was just sitting next to me, peering over my shoulder, and he just kept
I know that guy.
He just kept looking at me like, was that important? You know what I mean? And I was like, yes, bud, it's all important.
He knows.
Don't worry.
He knows. And for the audio listeners, we've got a guest here on the show. It's Weston's son, making a special appearance. But Weston, let's get into this interview, right? I think in the topic of talking about, someone like Justin Tucker, who is now a free agent, I guess, or will be waived. I guess he'll hit waivers. But I think this is a good place to kind of segue into the John Lynch thing, because one of the things that he mentioned was just the team building process that they went through back in 2017 and having literally a vision statement for what they wanted this team to be. And I didn't know this, Weston, but he mentioned how a lot of the same scouts from that Trent Baalke era are still with the team. I did not know that. And I think a lot of people, had they known that back then, would have been like, you know, what the hell are you doing? Like, Trent Baalke sucked at drafting, just let all these guys go. But I think what John Lynch said is important is that, like, you know, they gave them a shot to kind of stick around, and they had great ideas. And that kind of got me thinking that this whole process, it's so important to have, one, a clear vision, which they obviously did, but also being able to communicate that to a scouting department and make sure that everything is connected. Like, John Lynch also talked about how, you know, coaches are very much involved in the drafting process and scouting and all that. And I think when we look back on times where, you know, Trent Baalke was the GM, things felt very disconnected, right?
For sure.
Between GM and the coach, where, you know, Baalke was just drafting dudes that he liked, and, you know, no wonder those guys didn't work out, you know. And so I think it makes me feel good that John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, which obviously we've known this, but like, they have a great working relationship where I think they have a unified idea of what they want in the locker room, what culture they want to bring, what kind of players they want. And they built that back in 2017, right? Like, and they've stayed true to that this whole time. So I think that's important when it comes to like culture and, you know, bringing in free agents, drafting guys. Who do you want in your locker room? And that's why I kind of took that from, you know, me mentioning Justin Tucker, because I'm like, there's a reason that he would not fit in with the 49ers, and signing him, or even the thought of signing him, would go against everything that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have built since 2017.
Yeah, at some point we go through this exercise as 49er fans. When any player becomes available, we just automatically want to draw a straight line to the team. This one has no jagged line, crooked line, straight line. To your point, with how the 49ers brass, Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, defined what it means to be a 49er. Now, this is not a unique strategy, right? This is done across the league. Like, you look at players and you're like, that person is such a chief. They're such a 49er. They're such a giant. They're such a whatever. Because teams do have identities, and they are usually in the shape and form of your GM and coach. There's a reason, like, these legacy franchises like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New York Giants, the Chicago Bears, like, they have a cast type, right? Because it's been these same owners for a long, long time, run under the family values, the Mara and Tisch values, the Rooney value systems, right? Even up in Detroit, the Ford family value systems. But what I really appreciated about what John and Kyle were saying about like the mentality is like, I think the way that when you think of Al Davis, you think just win, baby. That was the mantra, right? Like, that's how they did everything. That was who personifies just win. That's who we're going to draft. Eventually that became equated to just speed, right? But I think what I really loved about what John was talking about was the cohesiveness with Kyle and the decision to say, we're not going to uproot what's already here. And it's very common to do that. But I think they just took a calculated look at it like, hey, I'm a first-time head coach and I'm a first-time GM with zero experience, right? Of being in a front office in any capacity. Like, let's not uproot our foundation. Like, let's allow them to prove themselves, just like every player is going to prove themselves, just like we have to prove themselves. And it panned out well. The 49ers were not void of talent under Trent Baalke as the general manager, right? Like, at the end, they were just ineptly coached, right? They weren't like, yeah, Trent has some whiffs. Yeah, he loves his ACL players. Yeah, all of that. But they still found talent consistently throughout that regime. And the team appeared in the Super Bowl, appeared in multiple, 3 straight NFC championship games, right? Like, so it's, but I just loved my biggest, if I took an overall vibe and tie it back to what we're talking about here, like strategy and mold, is that mold wasn't decided by one individual, right? It sounds like it was a collective, right? Yeah. And then narrowed down by the people that matter the most and are the face of the franchise, the head coach and the general manager. But it sounded like they got everybody's input. And think about just running a business, Steph, right? Like, you just need everybody to believe in the mission, right? And then it becomes about the people. So for the 49ers, like, we just need our staff and then ultimately our players to believe in what we're trying to accomplish, why we chose them to be part of this process. And it's just easier to buy in, especially in the NFL and all professional sports. Like locker rooms could be really jagged. They could be real, you know what I mean? Like they can be very political. They can be a lot of things. And it's really hard to strip that, like, and finding a message that adults can get behind, highly paid adults can get behind, that's not their own initiative.
Yeah, for sure. And, obviously they learned a lot of lessons along the way. I mean, especially for first-time head coach, first-time GM, who didn't have a lot of, I guess, front office experience. He just came from scouting and consulting with the Broncos, right? Yeah. With their scouting
on a whim for free.
On a whim for free. Yeah, that's crazy. And so, yeah, now they're kind of at a crossroads where they get to do it again. And one of the things that John Lynch also mentioned, or that he talked about and he gets asked about quite a bit, this whole offseason has been in regards to the changes that have come on this roster, right? By way of, the difficult season that they had last year. But I'm going to just play a clip right here for what he had to say about that.
The York family has been incredibly supportive of us since we've been here in 2017 and allowed us to be really aggressive. And we have been. And at some point, you got to pay the piper. And rather than have like a multi-year reset, we felt like we had an opportunity, and I won't say a need, but like a want to say, because you look back and you say, okay, we've got an expensive roster. We have an aging roster. I think we were the oldest team in football at the end of last season. Like, now's the time to go do a retool, not a reset, not a tear up, because we still have that core of Hall of Fame players that are here. In fact, we just extended Kittle, and we're proud to have done that. We're talking to some other guys, but we needed to infuse some youth into our roster. And we thought it was a good opportunity. Those are hard decisions to make. There's some examples of some teams who have done a really good job of that. Buffalo, I think last year quietly I thought Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott did a great job of doing that, and it was seamless. Helps when you have Josh Allen playing the way he played, but they still did that. And, the Rams did it a few years ago. And so,
yeah, so Weston, I noticed you laughed at one certain part, and it was after he said, at some point you got to pay the piper. And I'm guessing maybe you did, because we've heard that same phrase at least three times this offseason.
Consistency in the message, at least.
Yeah, he's a man of consistency for sure. But I thought it was also interesting that he does go on to mention examples from recent years, the Bills, the Rams, who he said successfully have been able to do this. Not a full rebuild, but a retooling of the roster. And basically, they're doing exactly what we thought they were doing from the beginning of this. And yeah, of course, they're kind of taking the blueprint of some of those teams that did it and trying to apply that so that it's not a full rebuild for this team, but still one with many necessary changes.
Yeah, I mean, the Lynchisms that you got throughout this conversation. I don't think any of this was like surprise information or surprise speak, and it's been rather consistent, actually, right? Like, hey, we paid a lot of money out. We looked internally and realized that we are the oldest team in the National Football League, and it doesn't feel like, based off last season, that we're any closer to the goal. It feels like we're further apart. Now feels like the time, and now feels like the time because, as he said, they walked into, dude, you're out of your mind. As he said, like, they walked into a draft where they had 11 draft picks, right? Feels like an ample time to go get, an injection of youth, if you will. Decisions to be made around others with contracts, and still a really solid core of players, albeit aging, right? But still a really solid core of players. with a boost of energy from last year's draft class. So it just felt like timing was right. I know we'd want to argue that this could have been done sooner, should have been done sooner with certain players, but I can't argue with their logic of like, hey, it was just kind of staring us in the face that like, if we're going to do it, now is the time to do it. It's no longer about, he used a very specific phrase, Steph, and I think this should be appreciated more in all professional sports. We were no longer going to be the hunted. Now we get to go do some hunting ourselves. Like that's just a different perspective about going about your business. Like, and brings a whole new set of opportunities, right? And with this youth movement, you know, he talked about camp participation and people being there and buying back into the message of when they were the best. Like, I don't know, just by and large, like a good interview, but I'll applaud it more for the consistency in the message. I don't think this is anything we haven't heard. It's just we got more from the guy who's been delivering the message today, you know?
Yeah, and you know, my thing is and has been this whole off season is that it didn't have to be this drastic. Not that it is super drastic, because as we said, it's not a rebuild, it's just a retooling.
Yep.
But even that has come with some hurt. Like, you know, John Lynch talked about how difficult it was to see all these free agents, you know, leave the team and not be able to be as aggressive as maybe they've been in years past in free agency, right? And that's just the reality of where they are right now in this retooling. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it didn't have to be this difficult. And John Lynch kind of said something that Kyle Shanahan alluded to when it was like last month, 2 months ago now, where he was at the owners meetings, and you know, he talked about how they weren't really drafting based on needs anymore.
Yep.
And so I want to play that clip here and just get everyone's thoughts. I want to play it in context so people know that I'm not just tripping here.
It's a really fun process. I love it because I think it's the greatest representation of our entire building coming together for one purpose that's really, really important. So that means scouting, coaching, R&D, analytics, medical is critical to this whole thing.
Right.
Our player engagement people, everyone's invested in the draft. And this year it was so critical with 11 picks. And for the first time in a long time, you know, the last few drafts, we've just been adding role and complementary players. Mm-hmm. This year, we actually had needs. These guys got to come in and play and contribute. And it made it really fun. It made it really exciting. It always is. And
all right. So again, you know, kind of singing the same tune that Kyle Shanahan said, that like the last few years, like they were just, the only needs they had were backups, complementary role players. So that's basically how they drafted. But what that sounds like to me, Weston, is that they stopped drafting best player available. Because if you're drafting best player available, you're not necessarily looking to satisfy a certain role on your team. You're just getting the best player available, regardless of position, regardless of the depth chart in that particular position group. Like, you know, so what it sounds like based on what they have both said at this point is that, you know, they got away from that a little bit. And I don't know how I feel about that. Maybe I'm reading into it a little too much, and because I already had that suspicion in my head. But what are your thoughts? Talk me off the ledge here.
I'm going to talk you off the ledge. I think don't read too far into it. I think that this team very early, 2017, 18, 19, they were drafting BPA, but they had the luxury to do it like they sit here right now because plenty of holes. So the chances are is even their BPA, best player available, was probably going to find an opportunity in the lineup, right? Over the last few years, while I don't agree with the strategy, I understand the strategy because it was, I mean, for a few years, you just looked at the roster and you're like, yeah, they got 7-8 picks, but like 3 of these guys are going to make the football team. You know what I mean? Like, so, okay, I think we are slotted here. I could draft who's the best tight end in the world. He's not taking George Kittle out of the lineup. Got it. You know what I mean? Like, so that's why I think they were on the plus side of the equation where they could get away from that science of drafting the best player available. But again, staring them in the face this year is, if you think of the exodus that took place, okay, we have 0 defensive linemen, right? Like you can go on down the list and it's like, we got to draft guys that start. And the chances are we can throw a dart, around our best players, and we're going to need it. Whatever position they're going to play, we're probably going to need them, So I think it's a lot of coach speak. I think, they right now it's easier for John Lynch to say we're going best player available because there's more needs to do it. I just think think about your draft preparation. And he talked about this, right? 4 weeks, they're locked into a room. They're doing this all day, every day. If you are really looking at your roster and you're like, I have 3 holes to plug, it's just human nature to prioritize those 3 holes, right?
Sure.
And overvalue somebody because of positional value versus overall player value. So I didn't like, it didn't make me get closer to the ledge. I was like, I got it. Makes sense. You should never do that. You should always just have the best players you could possibly have. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, that's my thing. I'm like, I'm not pleased with it, and they're not saying it like they regret it at all. Like
no.
they're just saying it very matter of factly, and I don't know if that's something they would avoid doing in the future. So that's kind of a bit of my concern. And I kind of disagree. Like I almost think that when you have so many needs, you kind of can't draft best player available because you kind of have to draft based on needs. And we saw the 49ers go 5 straight defensive picks to start this draft. Why? Because those were all their needs. I think you can do both in some instances where, the best player available happens to satisfy a need that you have on the roster. But I do think that at some point, when there's a lot of roster turnover and you're not as deep as you used to be, you do kind of lose the privilege of always being able to draft best player available. Yeah. Why do we always look at teams like the Ravens, the Eagles, the Chiefs, back end of their rounds, right? And yet they always get these really good players, and we're like, of freaking course. Because like they have the privilege of going best player available and they exercise that privilege. But what I'm hearing from, Lynch and also Kyle, when he said it about a month ago, is that they just stopped exercising that and they were just going for role players. And I get it. The roster was so deep that, yes, realistically, a lot of those guys probably weren't going to get the chance, but we know injuries happen. We know that, sometimes there are rookies who you bring in and they surprise you, and they could end up being better than some of the veterans you have. Look at Dominic Puni last year, right? And it still is not lost on me that he only got that opportunity because of injuries. But still, I just think I just wish they prioritize best player available when they had the best chance to do that. But because
you're right? Like you talk about a team like the Chiefs or the Eagles, right? Ravens can just, dude, you for real? Are just consistently drafting in the back half of the round. I think they get a shot at getting these players that are like high up on people's boards that slip over because other teams are too hell-bent and on positional value. Because if they weren't, right, then they would probably have taken those players already, and like they're the benefactors. You can argue it either way. I would say this, and I think John Lynch even said something to this effect, was, look, you just can't, like, you build your draft board, right? Like, and you don't want to blow it up. A ton of it goes into it. I don't think they went into the draft being like, we're going to draft 5 defensive players, like with our first 5 picks. I do think they looked at it and like, okay, these are the guys, you do your best to map it out, who you think is going to be there, but then you don't stray too far. You know what I mean? Like, hey, okay, we went D lineman first. Great. If there's a tackle sitting there, with our second pick that we like, maybe we'll take them. But if we don't value a tackle there, like we're not just going to do that. That's when we're going to go. And I think that's just how it fell for the first 5 rounds. You know what I mean? Is I do think, John Lynch is a defensive guy. Kyle Shanahan is an offensive guy. We just talked about their collaboration. Dude, you got to just relax. All right. I know Bosa's falling
I
down.
mean, he's speaking his mind.
He's upset with my
happy.
philosophy.
He's not happy about the 49ers drafting philosophy the last couple of years.
He wanted a
Don't
tackle.
blame him.
He wanted a tackle. He wanted to tackle this draft.
But you know what's funny on that note, Weston. So John Lynch kind of said, like, if Michael Williams, who the 49ers selected 11th overall in this year's draft, he was like, if Michael wasn't there, probably would have been an offensive player.
Yeah.
And that got me
But
thinking,
who
I was
would
like,
have been?
who? I was like, well, who? You know, like, would they have gone for a tackle then? Or are they thinking like a skill position?
But
Like,
Banks was
I'm
gone.
intrigued.
I'm thinking that was a wide receiver. He just wants me to hang up Bosa real quick. Just give me 2 seconds. I'm sorry. I know what's
Oh,
happening.
you're
It
good.
is
You're
good.
good. As Weston parents, the
So
realities of parenting.
Oh my God. But we love it. Join the parent club. What were we just talking about? Sorry.
No, the first round pick.
So who would honestly?
have been?
I think they would have been it was something stupid like up Shanahan's path. Like would
I know. I'm
Matt
like,
Golden gone 11 overall instead of slipping to the Packers in the back half of the first round? I don't know. I don't know. But there was no off. Or it could have been the what do you call a kid from Sub A ball? The Zabel from North Dakota State. Maybe that was the guy. They were linked to him late, right? Jan.
Yeah, I gotta like look and see who was available, during that pick, and I'll try to reverse engineer this. But now hearing that kind of intrigued me a little bit, because my assumption was okay. It was probably Michael, Shamar Stewart, Walter Nolan. So him saying offensive player makes me think, oh, it was not those guys. I thought they'd definitely go defensive player no matter what, but
here are the offensive guys that went after they picked. Immediately after the guard from Alabama, Booker to Dallas. Tyler Warren at 14.
Warren, that could have very well have been the pick, maybe.
Zabel went 18. That could have Emeka Egbuka, he went 19. So yeah, I mean they had some
it would have totally
options.
Been a Kyle.
Yeah, none of them would have made 49er fans happy. This is the closest to happy the 49er fans could have been, I think, walking out of that first round, knowing that one of the tackles didn't slip to them, right? I mean,
and what is in the comments here, Sharks fan 232. If Michael wasn't there, might have meant that Banks would be there, which is plausible because Calvin Banks ended up going to the Saints.
Yep.
John Lynch talked about he thought Michael would go to the Saints. So it could have very well been Calvin Banks, which I think would have also made some sense for the 49ers.
I think they would have been fine with it. I don't know how much I'm reading into that they were calling up to make trades for Michael Williams. I hope they were, and I hope they were turned down, and I hope they still got their player, because then that would give me a little bit more confidence in their belief in him instead of just like, the board fell that way. You know what I mean? Like what I always talk about, if you got a guy, you go get the guy, right? If that was the guy and they were trying to make the move and they still got him, well, then that makes me feel better about our first round pick.
Well, I thought it was interesting. He was talking about how trades are so common now, especially with like the newer GMs. You want to get very aggressive, and they kind of were on that same boat when they first started, right? Like, hey, like we want the guy that we want. We got to be aggressive, and you kind of it's sort of like you want to show off a little bit, like. You got to go out with some fireworks as a first-time GM, your first couple of drafts. And so he talked about kind of learning throughout the years to be patient and kind of let things come to them as well. And so while, yes, he did talk about, wanting to move up for Michael, I think thankfully, they did get turned down. They let the board fall to them, and they ended up with the guy anyway. So it's probably a good lesson in how things could work out well if you just kind of let the board fall to you. And you see a lot of good teams do that, right? I mean, we're talking about the Eagles earlier. We're talking about the Ravens, like just teams that let the board fall to them. It always works out for them for some reason. For some reason, it always.
It's so aggravating. It is so aggravating. I swore James Pierce or
I know
was
James
gonna
Pierce
go
going to the. I know
to Chiefs or the Eagles. I would have
know.
bet my children on it that would have happened.
Yeah, I know. But
you know what's funny is
draft good players.
They didn't trade at all, did they? Did they move at all?
The 49ers did not. They kept all their original picks,
which is like wild to me. Because you got to feel like there's got to be somebody that maybe they were in love with that was there. That was like, it's only going to cost us this 7th to slide up 7, 8, 9 slots and fill in the blank round.
Yeah, and what's interesting is like him admitting that they would have moved up for Michael and wanting to trade with we're assuming Carolina, right?
Yeah, probably.
That would have cost quite a bit, and you're giving up picks for that. And yet, like if later in the draft you don't think about trading up and you don't actually trade up for another player, and maybe they did try and it just never really worked out for them, similar to the Michael thing, but I don't know. And yes, they did get poached on a couple of offensive linemen that I think they probably would have been interested in, but such is life. Sometimes we talk about being patient and letting the board fall to you. Sometimes it doesn't. So, it could backfire. It could go either way. But I'm okay with the 49ers taking all 11 picks. I think this was one year where we feel like they needed all 11, right?
For sure. You know what I mean? Like, it would not have been a successful draft if they came out of here only making 6 selections because they were aggressive and trading and doing all of those things. They still need bodies. They still need, you still got to hope that somebody is a diamond in a rough that you drafted and you felt. And the more opportunities you have at that, the more likely that might be the outcome. The only way this draft's successful if you only make 6 selections going in with 11 is if you had 5 of them in the first round somehow, right? Or in the first 2 rounds, because then you feel good about the immediate contribution about those players. But I don't know. What I really just enjoyed about that was just you hear so much, and usually franchise go boom for a short period of time when there is a disconnect between the coach and the GM, right? And you were starting to hear rumblings that might be taking place. And I didn't get that vibe even a little bit, to the sense of like, hey, we told Kyle after the season, it's been a long season, dude. We love you. We care about you. Go spend some time with your family. Get the hell out of here. We'll wrap it up, figure it out. Like, that's appreciation. That's not like your boss being like, get back to work, bro. You know what I mean? The day ain't over or whatever. We fell short of the goal. You better be back here ready to go tomorrow. It felt, you know what it was? Everybody will tell you about their values. Steph, every San Francisco 49ers are a company just like anybody else, right? They're a business. And every company is run off their core values and blah, 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 whatever it is, right? Like, I at least feel like they, and by them, I mean front office, embody that value. So it makes it believable. I don't know how else to tell you. Like, especially if you're a young, impressionable kid who's just about to get their big $1 million paychecks, right? Like, hey, these are the guys who are giving me my opportunity, Like, it's no wonder that you hear people like Deebo Samuel talk about his relationship with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. They got a good thing going on there. So let's quit trying to step on it. You know what I mean? Like, they got a good thing.
Yeah, and that's so clear when they talk about each other. And, I one thing that John mentioned that was a little funny was like, Kyle gets anxious when I'm not around, which I was like, okay, I think that's kind of funny. And John Lynch was just kind of talking about how he's not always able to, go and scout players whenever he wants to. Like, he has to be a little more selective about where he goes and not wanting to be gone for too long. And that's because Kyle prefers to have him.
That's the sign of any good functional relationship, in my opinion, of like being, you know what I mean? Like, My life crumbles if my wife's away. I'm hopeful hers does when I'm away. You know what I mean? Like, that's a good work. That's a good relation. Forget working, right? That's just what relationships are: dependency on one another, etc. Maybe Kyle's a little over dependent. Maybe, I don't know. You know,
I
but,
know it's like, oh wow.
but at least he took a jab at
him.
him. You know, you can't have a good family function without a little jab here or there. With Kyle not even there to defend himself. You know what I mean? Like, it just, the dynamic. You know what? This is what I would boil that down to. I know it's only John Lynch's interpretation of this that we're seeing. I'd love to hear more from Kyle, etc. It just feels like the dynamic is getting back on track, right? Like, the values are back on the wall in the building. You know what I mean?
Sure.
We won't let 1 year define us. All that coach, player, hyperbole speak is back. And that's just going to make for a better football team, a more cohesive. And this is the ultimate team sport, right? So I don't know. I walked out of that excited.
I think actually, before we get into this one, I think this is a good segue to this clip here where John Lynch talks about the slight update, if you want to call it that, quote unquote update, because it's not really an update. It's the same thing we've been hearing for the last month. But then he goes into talking about the team being present at the offseason program. And, you know, one of the quotes you mentioned earlier, Weston, how they're kind of the hunter instead of the hunted. So I'm going to play this clip because it includes some good nuggets here, I thought.
What I will tell you, can't tell you, is we're having really good, positive discussions. When it gets done, I'm not sure. Hope sooner rather than later, but like, hope is not a strategy. So we're making progress. We've had good discussions. I'm looking out here because our players are starting to arrive for their day of work. Brock's out there and doing a tremendous job, as all our players. Like, you know, after a year like that, it was important. And Kyle did a great job saying, guys, when we built this thing, when we had our success, like, we had 99% of our guys here in the off season. It's voluntary. We can't make you come, but man, it'd be cool if everybody came. And we had I think everybody but one player here when we kicked off this year. So we've got a motivated, focused team. It's kind of fun being we didn't win, you know, the Super Bowl in the past, but I think we've always been a team that people have put up there. Hey, this is the favorite. Now we get to sit back and maybe hunt a little as opposed to being the hunted. And I like that. I like having a little doubt. You know,
doubt.
a little bit of pissed off in our, a little doubt. And that's a good thing for us. And our guys are responding as such.
Definitely.
First of all, masterful segue by Lynch. He was talking about Purdy and the whole contract negotiation, which I'm sure he's thrilled to do every time he's asked about it. Answer the same way 100 times. But then, like, oh, I'm just looking off to the side here because our team's out there, and he goes into that whole spiel, and it's like, before you know it, like, we forgot about the whole Purdy question. They didn't even follow up on it. It was masterful by John Lynch. But I didn't care about the update either because, like I said, it's the same update we've been hearing. I'm glad that things are going well, I guess, and Purdy is there. Him talking about, hey, like, there was only one player when we kicked off who wasn't here. And I think by now, like, we probably figured that was George Kittle, right? Because he didn't show up right away. It took him like a couple days. He was enjoying WWE and doing his whole off-season thing, having fun. But he's there now, so I wonder if everyone is there at this point. I mean, if there was just one player missing, hell, that's really good. And I again, to talk about the culture that these two have built, for Kyle to, like, tell players, hey, like, you don't have to, but I think it'd be cool if y'all came. And for all of them to basically come, I think that's a pretty big deal and speaks to, one, the respect that they have for Kyle, for John, and for each other to be there. And so, yeah, the vibes seem to be back on track, right?
Yep. And it's early, right? Nobody's winning the Super Bowl in April and May. That's just the truth of it. But I do think it is telling. Because first of all, I just have no understanding why it's considered voluntary. Like, you're an employee, like, be here. You get paid a lot of money for basically 6 months out of the season. Like, what's a couple weekend dates here or there from? And so I never understood that, and you make your exceptions as a team of like, okay, our 15-year vet doesn't need to be here for this particular day because this is like initial install, et cetera. But it is telling when they're there. And I think, to your point, more for each other. I think that's probably how this was positioned. We will be a better team, not I need you there, I want you there. And I think part of that probably comes from people like Fred Warner, Christian McCaffrey, even a no new contract for Brock Purdy yet, but still there. That's leading by example, right? And I think other players, appreciate that. And I'm sure there's been locker room chat, texts. These guys all know each other. They all hang out. They're all sitting Warriors courtside, et cetera. Like, guys, we got to be there. We got to be there. We don't want, if I'm George Kittle, I'm Christian McCaffrey, I'm Brock Purdy, I'm Fred Warner, I'm Nick Bosa, I'm these people, Brandon Ayuk, I'm these people. I don't want to live through last year. I've never felt that as a San Francisco 49er, and I don't want to feel that again. I think there's a little extra motivation there. So all signs, all arrows point up right now. Low bar based off of last year's performance, but they certainly point in a much different direction. I feel like when you look back at last year, and I read, Steph, your reports from camp, right? Other people's reports from camp. Like, it was evident early that something was amiss, right? Well, right now it's evident early that something feels good. Something feels good.
Yeah, I didn't want to admit it then, but
yeah, of course.
Back, it's like the signs were there. But you just back then, I just looked at how good the team still was roster wise.
Yeah.
And I was like, they'll figure it out. Like, there's no way they don't. But that just goes to show that that's not everything. And as Benali says here in the comments, I remember when last season started, Debo was talking about them being the best team in the league. And it felt like the team was just resting on their laurels. It's nice to see the team seem hungrier. In a sense, thank God they got humbled. They needed that so bad. And yeah, if it's brought this re-energized team that's present for the voluntary portion of the offseason program, and if they're feeling like they can go out and be the hunters now instead of the hunted, that is a big shift, I think, Weston, in that this team came up in 2017 and the years that followed, right? Like, they were built on that, being the underdogs and being overlooked. And I think it's good to be back in that position again. Yep. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure, the team is as well. Before we get out of here, Weston, one more story that Lynch dropped that I definitely want to share here because it's kind of funny. I'll just play it here. It's just how the 49ers almost accidentally forfeited a pick in the 2024 draft.
When you get a call from other teams, they're offering you a trade, the clock is ticking down. You don't have a whole lot of time to operate. How do you go about making those decisions and making those decisions quickly?
There are some gnarly close calls. Last year, in the fourth round, we took a receiver, Jake Cowing. So we got down to like a minute, 45 seconds. Then it was going to be Jake Cowing or a linebacker. Kyle and I like listening to our scouts and like this point. So I'm like, Kyle, we got to go. And he's like, no, we got 45 seconds. So I said, okay, fellas, show of hands, like who likes linebacker, who likes Cowing? And it was like really close. I'm like, Kyle, like we're going. And he's like, hold on, we got plenty of time, 30 seconds. And he goes, all right, here's why the receiver would be important. Here's why the linebacker, another show of hands. It's like, now there's 20 seconds. And he goes, okay, one more time, throw him up. I get the decision. I say, turn it in with like 7 seconds. And our guy, Justin Chabot, the scout, I give him a hard time because he's typing like this. It didn't make me like,
that's great.
And I think we went down to like 2 seconds and we got the pick in. That was the closest call we've ever had. And it's like performing in front of 80,000 people. Your owner, your boss is sitting there and like, this idiot, can you make the pick? You got 2 seconds left. Really? You came that close?
Oh God. Kyle Shanahan and his nonchalantness, I don't think that's a word, but I'm going to use it anyway.
Love it.
About how little time they had. I mean, this guy's never beating the clock management allegations at all. Like, it all makes sense, right?
Yep,
like
this
guy thinks he has all the time in the world, not worried about it. We'll figure it out. It did, but holy cow, 2 seconds left. I would have been so anxious, and this is why I would never be in a draft room, among many other reasons. But that's just so interesting because now I'm like, okay, who was the linebacker?
I have my suspicions on this. I have my suspicions on this. I just thought this story was awesome, right? Like a reminder in some capacity that like they're humans too, right? Pressure of being in front, performing in front of your boss and doing those things and getting nervous in the moment, and just months and months and sometimes years of work like on the table in front of you in 5 minutes to make that decision and hope that it's the right decision. It's intense in those rooms. But yes, Kyle has forever and will forever march to the beat of his own drum. He's never going to let any clock, whether it's rules or not, affect his decision time. But I do. So when I heard that, and I pulled up my tab here because I couldn't remember.
I got it too, so I'm gonna put it up here.
So I have the 4th round, or it was actually Callan was the last pick in the 4th.
He was the last pick of the 4th round, so very last. And so we got to look at the following players in the 5th round. If you look at the linebackers, let's just list them off here, and then you can give me who you thought it was. There's out of Temple, Jordan McGee. There was J.D. Bertrand.
Yep. There
was Tommy Eichenberg. There was Jeremiah Trotter Jr. out of Clemson. Yep. Edifwan Olufosio.
A lot of linebackers in the round.
And Jalen Ford from Texas. So those were all the ones in the 5th round. And like, there's no guarantee that it's even a player that got picked in the 5th round. Let's be honest. This team does reach on players sometimes. But if we're narrowing it down to just, the linebackers that got picked in the 5th and shortly after Cowan got picked, who did you think it might have been?
So there's a couple on there that like, I just think it's the kid from Temple, Jordan McGee. Too many stars align for me. Adam Peters is in that draft room making that pick. These scouts in San Francisco all worked for Adam Peters for a long time. There's going to be similar mentality, similar mantra. You're seeing, in my opinion, the Washington Commanders be built the way that the San Francisco 49ers were built. There's just too much evidence to ignore for me to tell me that it wasn't Jordan McGee. You know what I mean? Like,
that would have been, I think, probably my first guess as well. And let's not forget, like last year's draft was Adam Peters first as a GM, but much of that draft process the scouting process has already been done with the 49ers. Like, let's not forget that, like before he got hired by Washington. So I'm sure the 49ers already knew kind of what players he liked, and they probably liked a lot of the same players. And I think they're in the next couple years are probably gradually like separate from that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the very first year, I'm sure they had a lot of the same thoughts, a lot of the same favorite players. So that would have been my guess as well. But curious to know what anyone in the comments thinks. Which linebacker do you think would have been the 49ers pick instead of Jacob Cowing with the last pick in the 4th round? Now, here's the other thought, Weston. Do you think they regret that decision at all? Because, I mean, we know that, and that's the crazy part. Like, they already knew what had happened to Dre Greenlaw, and they needed a linebacker. They ended up, drafting linebackers later in the draft. But I wonder if they maybe regret that, because it's possible, very much possible, that linebacker could have seen the field more than Cowing did in 2024, just like Benali says.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm sure you can do this exercise for every single pick, right? Like, I always think of the Jalen Hurd example, right? And the receivers that went shortly thereafter we drafted Jalen Hurd, right? And the impact they're making in the National Football League right now. And I still stand by the Jalen Hurd pick. I was so happy when they made that pick, but injuries, obviously, unfortunately. I do think there's probably a little regret. I don't want this to be the cop-out answer that it's too early to tell, because we we know Kyle and his stance on rookie wide receivers. So it was fair to assume that Jacob Cowan was probably never really going to get the opportunity anyway. And I don't know. I think they felt confident in their plan. But if with D Winters and hopefully getting Dre back midway through the season, and I thought that the schedule was going to stack up favorably for them early on, and they'd have stack a couple wins. You know, they were looking 6-8 months down the road. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if any of those players stick. You know what I mean? If they even find the field, they might got a shot, but I don't even know if any of these guys that are picked here, I don't know if they find the field.
Yeah, and they ended up drafting Tatum Bethune, as we know, in the 7th round last year. So they got a linebacker, and he didn't see, really time. But
it's a shame. He's an instinctive player. He's just a little. I was surprised by the pick. I love Bethune. Bernardo Green,
yeah.
Bethune. I told you all about him, but
those FSU guys
they're televised, right? They just happen to be games that I catch, etc. But my brother's a big fan, but I just think Bethune he's just a little too slow for what the 49ers want to do at the linebacker.
Probably why he was available in the 7th round.
He's instinctive. Like, he can find the football, but he's going to find it a tenth of a second late. You know what I mean? And that's arm tackle versus body in front. That's the difference. And that's going to be a problem for him. Like, go forward. I don't know. I don't think they regret it. I don't. Apparently they didn't even freaking care who they're going to pick because there was no urgency around it whatsoever, right?
That's my other question in all this. I'm like, don't you guys literally have a draft board where all the players are ranked, but maybe after a certain point, I don't know.
Let me ask you. You know the NFL, right? You know these guys, right? Like, what? I want like a full 24-hour camera in the draft rooms. I bet these dudes are cheers and beers or wine or whatever after they make their first round pick. They might got to the 4th round like wide receiver. I mean, I'm like, listen, this is a profession as well, right? For a lot of people in that room. So I'm having a little fun with it. I'm not trying to be insulting, but like, a draft stressful. Maybe by the 4th round, you're just like on edge. You're on full tilt, like it didn't go the way you wanted
it. It didn't seem like Kyle was. He was like, we got time. Let's take another
Cabo Kyle.
Let's have another raise of hands.
Yeah. I didn't like the count. You're gonna pick wide receiver this time.
Yes, I know. That's why he kept recounting.
Yeah.
All right, Weston. This was a fun show. Definitely got some good tidbits out of that interview. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, it is on Chris Sims' podcast YouTube channel. Particularly, it's the Chris Sims Unbuttoned podcast. So make sure you guys check that out. Full video and full interview is out there. But appreciate all of you that tuned in, dropped in the comments. Make sure you like this video if you haven't yet. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, not just mine, but Weston's as well. Audio listeners, leave a rating, leave a review. But for now, have a good rest of your Monday, folks. Have a great week. Peace.